How do you best capture a feeling? It is the question I have been asking myself for the last 40-something days. How do I best describe the 1,812 days I spent in New York City? It was the best of times.
Hello.
Hey guys, today we're gonna be...
It was the worst of times.
I just called my parents and I basically was crying.
It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. On the one hand, living and working a corporate job in New York City was all my 14-year-old self wanted. I got to work at companies I admired. I spent Saturday nights and even the occasional weeknights with a big friend group where we would do nothing remotely productive. There were days when I felt like I had it all, when I wondered, how can it possibly get better than this? Except, it was also the worst of times. New York City was also where I experienced the lowest of the lows. It was where I felt the most lonely, experienced the worst breakup, and questioned my life purpose. How do you best capture a feeling? That of hope, optimism, independence, unabashed 20-something spirit, but also that of pain, loneliness, hurt, frustration, and the sense that you don't quite belong anywhere, both the best and worst of times. How do you tell the full story? Well, let's try by going back to the start. If people ask me why I moved to New York City, usually I would give them the TLDR version of the story. I had a dream, so I chased it. While this was true, it was also not entirely accurate. Part of my move was fueled by vengeance. A few months before I graduated from college, I got to interview with Bloomberg. About 3 years after moving to New York City, I eventually got to work for Bloomberg, and then I would leave after realizing that I wanted to pursue my own path. But my 22-year-old self did not know any of this yet. For her, getting a job at Bloomberg would be a dream. I made it through all the rounds but eventually did not get selected. Before this, I thought getting a job in New York City was too ambitious of a feat. I was fully ready to stay on the West Coast. But getting that interview made me reconsider what I thought was possible by making me realize that my dream wasn't too big. You know the saying, rejection is redirection? Well, I don't think that it is necessarily true. Sometimes when one door closes, another one does open. But sometimes you need to show up in a better version of yourself every day and keep knocking on that door until it opens. So being the stubborn 22-year-old that I was, with nothing quite holding me back in Los Angeles, I sold my belongings, downsized to 2 suitcases, and moved to New York City. At that time, I had secured an internship, so it was an excuse to stay in New York City for a while. I was young, foolish, a girl with a dream and vengeance, determined to make it work. There is no way if I try again, I won't get that job right, was what I kept telling myself. While I was deep in delusion land, I also added a few companies that I thought would be absolutely insane if I got to work there. I kept applying to jobs and focused on what I did best, which was getting to know people. I cold emailed people, attended events, and lived with strangers I met on the internet. I asked people out and to be my friend. Looking back on this period, I learned 2 precious lessons. Sometimes rejection is redirection, but sometimes rejection simply means not now. There is no harm in trying and asking for what you want, kindly. This was the most untethered I had been in my life until this point. I missed having the stability of a postal code, but it was also when I felt like I had grown up the most, and I was living my life to the fullest. Though I was having a blast, I also had a lot of anxieties and self-doubt. While my friends were settling into their first full-time jobs, I was still bouncing around New York City trying to find mine. A part of me felt nervous, but I held on to the faith that what's meant to be mine simply won't pass me by. On September 15th, I hit my first low point in New York City. I moved to New York City because of a dream and vengeance, but also because I wanted to move on from an old relationship. The change in seasons caused me to face the fact that while everything around me was changing, I hadn't made any significant strides. I hadn't quite moved on yet, and despite 3 months of job interviews and a few final rounds, I still hadn't made it yet. I did, however, somehow meet a friend of a friend of a friend who let me stay in her apartment for free all through December. I decided to take it as a sign from the universe to simply keep going. As time went by, it felt increasingly harder to push through. But at the very last moment, in the first week of December, I landed a job at the New York Times. I was so happy. In this period, I learned the first few important lessons. You have to be patient because things take time. Usually, things take longer than you like, but just because things haven't happened doesn't mean they won't happen. Sometimes you need to go through unpleasant things to become the person you need to be. Show up and stay consistent even when you don't feel like it. Of course, this isn't even the full New York City story, but if I go into every detail, the story will take forever. So let's skip a few pages of this chapter, shall we? After a couple thousand something days, a few things became apparent to me. I realized that while I dreamed of being in corporate America, I didn't quite like it, and I was also not very good at it. I also realized that I wasn't playing with my strengths, a byproduct of my inability to clearly define my strengths and also failing to recognize the value of them. I feel like on some subconscious level, I always knew what I was good at. I am creative, gritty, scrappy, personable, and good at telling stories. But I always thought that they were not good strengths. But it took a while for me to really recognize the value of my own strengths. If the first 5 years of post-grad life was figuring out what I liked and what I was good at, I want the next 5 years to be a chance for me to pursue the things where my strengths and interests are better aligned. I have a sneaking suspicion that content and startups is where I might have a better shot at succeeding. My desire to pursue my newfound dreams has led me to leave New York City, at least for the time being. But on a deeper level, I also wanted to take some time away because I was craving some change and because I was starting to forget. When I first came to New York City, I was so bold and I had eyes on the prize. A prize that I defined for myself. But with time, I became increasingly tempted to pursue the shiniest object, even though it wasn't what I originally wanted. I was becoming comfortable, even complacent, and consequently beginning to lose my edge and boldness. I forgot what it was like to take a chance on myself. I also started comparing myself with my friends who wanted different things in life. And sometimes it would feel like everyone had it together but me. Although this could be further from the truth, we are all trying to figure it out. But being in a city like New York can warp your judgment and cause you to develop a questionable definition of what is enough, and forget that living in New York City is first and foremost a huge privilege. I have to be honest with you, taking a risk at 27 feels much more nauseating than when I did at 22. But I remind myself that uncomfortable situations are how we grow, and the biggest risk you can take is not taking one at all. New York City also taught me a few things. That if you don't define what is important to you, other people will. Figuring out what you're good at is hard work. When you do, you need to pursue it relentlessly, because no one else will do it for you. So it's been over a month since I left New York City, and it has been hard, scary, and lonely. But I know that if I don't take this step, things will always remain as they are, and I will always wonder what if. Now, once again, I don't have a postal code, and I am bouncing around the globe. I have no certainty what I will be doing or where I will be in the next few months. But if there is anything I learned from my time in New York, I learned that it is okay to not have everything figured out. And though uncertainty and risk are scary, it is how we grow. That life is far more exciting than our plans, and we need to experience the bad days to become the person we need to be. That it is so important to listen to your inner voice, and that life is about embracing all the moments, the good and the bad, because there's no such thing as a perfect moment. New York City will always be my special place, and I have a feeling that someday I will be back. but for the time being, all the paths have led me to where I am now. Thank you for being here and for listening to my story. As always, from my heart to your screen, love, joy.